separation of church and state. That's nowhere in our founding documents. It's not in our Declaration of Independence. It's not in the Constitution.
You've seen the attacks on parents' rights. You've seen what's happening to children with transitioning.
I am so excited you're joining us. I'm Adrienne Bankert, here to tell you about something new we're starting right here at NewsNation. We have a network-wide series we've titled One Nation Under God. And every week we'll have new stories and conversations about faith. Now, you might be wondering why exactly a national cable news outlet would have a faith series. First, our mission here, as you've heard us say time and time again, is to provide news for all America. And Gallup polls show that the vast majority of Americans say they believe in God. 60 to 70% or more consider themselves Christians. So something so intrinsically tied to how millions of people see the world makes faith extremely newsworthy and extremely relevant. One reason why, just one, is that faith or a lack thereof influences how we all vote, who gets elected, what bills get passed, which influences us all. Now, it does raise a lot of questions. Is faith political? Should politicians be expressing their faith publicly? And what role should pastors and churches have in addressing issues that may show up on your ballot this year? As it turns out, more and more in the pulpit are advocating for voter empowerment. The intersection of politics and faith is a major part of our nation's storied history. Today, members of both the Democratic and Republican parties have been seen taking their faith public, including Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson and Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock, who is both a pastor and a politician in the church that Martin Luther King Jr. built. The contentious clash of media, government, and religion seems to have intensified, with an American Christian population whose numbers cannot be ignored in 2024.
Christians have maybe a little bit of spotlight on them now. You know, we're in an election year. Evangelicals make up 37% of the electorate.
While what we see portrayed online and on TV as a world of extremes, the average person of faith isn't exactly getting on their soapbox. Quite the opposite. In recent years, 1 in 3 has opted to stay home on Election Day. Up until now, Christians have had abysmal voter turnout. While the last presidential election was won by no more than 8 million votes, 3 times that number of registered Christians didn't cast their ballots.
We've seen that in past years, as many as 25 million Christians don't turn out to vote. Christians can decide the difference in every single election if they show up.
Do you feel like Christians are more engaged in the voting process today than before, or less engaged?
Less. Some are mad, but I think they're less engaged. The splintering on the political right and left, there's almost in Texas a grassroots versus establishment fighting going on, even on the Christian side. There's just and a need for truth. Same reason churches split. They grab their little issue, and if somebody's not 100% for me, then you're against me.
Jason Yates of the faith-based organization My Faith Votes and Debbie Wuthnow of iVoter Guide hope this year Christians will actually participate. Both sites provide tools to align scriptures with current candidates and legislation so that voters can choose according to their values.
iVoter Guide was used by 6.8 million voters last election cycle. It is data-driven. It is actions, not rhetoric. And we evaluate every candidate, looking at their campaign finance, their scorecards, their questionnaires. We have an army of about 1,000 volunteers who help us rate candidates. We evaluated 13,000 candidates. We give them a tool to help them really find the candidates that share their values and that will represent what's important to them. If you want to know what the Bible says about an issue, we have issue pages that will share with you on the right to life. What does the Democratic platform say? What does the Republican platform say? What does the Bible say? So if you want to know what the Bible says about immigration or right to life or even the economy, we've got Bible verses to educate you.
All across America, the faithful pray that more Christians do their civic duty. Education is among the key issues pastors are confronting from the pulpit in services all over America, as well as the highly charged topics of transgender issues as they relate to children, the immigration crisis, and the Israel-Hamas war.
The kinds of cultural shifts seen in schools and in the courts have some so impassioned that they're determined not to stay silent when it comes to educating their congregations about law and policy.
They've seen what's going on in culture. You've seen the attacks on parents' rights. You've seen what's happening to children with transitioning.
Whenever there is a void, it's a vacuum. Something fills that vacuum, right? And so there used to be prayer in schools. There used to be more intentional teaching to children about, yes, even right and wrong, moral decisions. When we removed prayer, when we removed some of that teaching, something filled the void. It was agnostic. It was this idea that it's anything we decide it to be. So absolutely, you're asking me, do I believe that there is an issue, a void in our schools? Absolutely. Is that creating long-term consequences for our nation? Yes, for sure.
Atheist, agnostic, or adherent, belief systems have never been contained within four walls, even the walls of a church. And religious freedoms still need to be protected, say pastors, not to be infringed upon by government overreach. The separation of church and state is interpreted a few ways, depending on who you ask. Most seem to agree it is a nod to the First Amendment that there shall be no establishment of a national religion like Britain had at one time.
And the reality is, that's nowhere in our founding documents. That phrase, separation of church and state, it was part of a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to a group of Baptists to clarify for them that the government's not going to get in your business, right? It wasn't to say that as people of faith, you shouldn't be bringing the influence of your faith into the public square.
That separation is not itself codified as law and has caused much debate. Thomas Jefferson wrote plainly that while there would be a separation, it was at least in part to protect the church with, quote, no law prohibiting the free exercise of religion.
Where that's really gotten buy-in, unfortunately, is what's called the Johnson Amendment. The Johnson Amendment is really a tax code that says any 501c3 or church can't speak out about the issues. And so churches, pastors have abdicated that responsibility, and that's encouraged Christians to question their role and responsibility in the process.
The Johnson Amendment, passed in 1954, bars any 501c3, including charities, universities, or churches, from campaigning, either opposing or endorsing political candidates. It does not prevent pastors or churches from the right to rock the vote or inform their communities on any issue from the pulpit, something that's been happening since before the time of the Founding Fathers.
Those voter guides are available if you're interested. They can be found on myfaithvotes.org and ivoterguide.com. I'm Adrienne Bankert. Check out every week on Thursdays more stories, more discussions, and fresh perspective with One Nation under God. Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.